All right. Welcome to all my free-minded friends. J.R. Dukes at your service. Appreciate everybody joining me. Let's give it a few minutes. I just hit the go button here on StreamYard, and we'll start having everybody pile in just 1 second. Obviously, we are aware by now of this Fani Willis ruling, and we're going to talk about it. I wanted to tell everybody right from the get-go, don't be too concerned about it. It's not as bad as it sounds. And today, I'm going to explain why. Let me know that you can hear me. Let me make sure that everything's coming through. All right, looking good. I want to say hello to everyone on Facebook. We are live today, of course, on YouTube, Twitch, and we are, looks like we're connected on X at the same time. So great. Appreciate everybody joining us. We'll have more signing on in just a minute. It takes a few minutes for everybody to get the alerts and to sign on. So we're all aware that today is D-Day for Fani Willis, Nathan Wade, and I've been saying for a long time that this particular case was essentially over. And I said that the DA's office would be removed from this case, that the judge really had no other choice. And I still stand behind what I just said. I firmly believe, hey, Charles, thanks for joining us. And Sapphire Ridge in the house. Appreciate everybody showing up as always. So why do I say that? Well, this is definitely what you call a split the baby verdict, right? It's like a King Solomon in the Old Testament, going to split the baby to make everybody happy. Of course, this particular verdict probably has not made anyone happy, but I'm not extremely disappointed. And there's a big reason behind that. We have to understand this is the reason why we don't want to have elected judges. I think that's pretty well what this boils down to. When you have an elected judge, this guy knows where his paycheck comes from. This guy is a relatively young judge at 34 years of age. He has a family to feed. He has kids to support. He has obligations that he has to take care of. And he knows who's going to write his paycheck, and that is the voters of Fulton County. The election for judge, for DA Fani Willis is coming up relatively soon. It's not in November. It's coming up in May. I don't really understand why in the United States we have elected judges. I think it's a terrible idea. And this Fani Willis situation is exhibit number one. It should not be a political process when it comes to justice. As I have said many times, just like the U.S. Supreme Court, when we have a judge in this country appointed, it should be appointment for life. Now, the flip side of that is if you get some judge, a judge that just wacko, crazy, something seriously wrong with this guy, then there should be ways that the legislature can remove a judge. However, they should still be paid. Kind of like ever how many years you've served, they still get some kind of pension, some kind of compensation, because otherwise you're going to have these type of decisions always. I really would hate to think that I'm in a politically unfavorable situation and I go before a judge that is an elected official. That is just not a good place to be. And now that I think about it, that's kind of what former President Donald Trump and the defendants are in. The only saving grace they got is the judge that they're dealing with right now is a Republican nominee. However, he is in a district that is a minority district, and it is extremely heavily controlled by the Democrats, really in all levels of the Fulton County government. We've talked about before that Fulton County is extremely corrupt. It's been corrupt as long as I can remember. As a matter of fact, it wasn't that long ago that the MLK, the Fulton County came out, I think it was 2020, and they actually issued an apology to his family, to his estate, whatever, because had it not been for JFK, MLK would have simply rotted away in a Fulton County jail cell. They literally put him in there, and we're just going to kind of lose the room. That's exactly what happened. If you Google it, you'll pull up the news story pertaining to that. Of course, I will say, if you Google Fulton County, it might not pull up. It's going to be pretty far to the back now with all this going on. But that's the reality. It's always been a corrupt county. It's just a corrupt place. And unfortunately, it's probably going to be that way for the foreseeable future. Now, if you read the judge's ruling, and we're going to go through that together, we're not going to go through every single word, but I am going to scan through it. There are some parts in there we need to talk about. I think it's important to just see what the judge is thinking. And I'm interested in what y'all's comments are pertaining to that. So first of all, was I correct in saying that DA Fani Willis was going to be removed off the case? I guess it depends on how you interpret that, because as is, it's not going to go forward. She's technically removed as is. However, the judge is allowing her with this split baby decision to stay on the case if she ditches her lover, Nathan Wade. So that's going to be interesting to see. Obviously, that's not really a decision. She's going to have to ditch Nathan Wade. I don't really see any other way unless she chooses to appeal. And we're going to talk about that in a second, but that appeal would not work in her favor. Additionally, it's very clear in the judge's ruling that he was not very favorable to Fani Willis. As a matter of fact, because of the so-called church speech that she gave, remember at A&E Church, the black church gave her a platform to essentially commit blaspheming. Well, that's exactly what she did. And the judge hinted, matter of fact, there wasn't really much of a hint about it. He just pretty well came out and said so, that he was going to consider a gag order in this case to simply gag, and not the defense, gag the prosecution, although I suspect he will probably gag both sides before this is over with. But we'll see. Obviously, a district attorney that goes out in public and makes the statements that she's made should be removed. And now, Chris, by the way, Charles, thanks for being here. Chris, appreciate you being back. And soap opera continues. Exactly right, Charles. Chris, on your comment, Dershowitz was not 100% correct. Dershowitz said the opposite of what I said. I said Fani Willis should be removed. He said Fani Willis will stay. But again, we're splitting hairs here, but it's important to see who is correct as far as this prediction goes. So Dershowitz, in my mind, cannot claim 100% victory, nor can I, because it just depends on how you spin it. Like, have you noticed everything is that way? You spin it any way that you go about it. And in this particular case, this is definitely spin. In this case, the district attorney's office, as Dershowitz would say, is not going to go forward as is. It just cannot do that. They have to lose their head prosecutor, their numero uno man, Nathan Wade. And then the judge will allow it to go forward. And he's already made comments that, again, on the gag order and some other changes that he might consider, or at least he's hinting about within the documents. We'll just have to see if that all pans out or not. But clearly, it's going to be different going forward. I also said that she's going to be removed, and that's not entirely correct if she does this and a few other things specifically related to Nathan Wade. Again, it's the fact of having elected judges. You got to, I mean, put yourself in his shoes. You're 34 years old. You have a family. I think I read that he has children. Matter of fact, he stated in that radio interview that he has children. You have children that depend on you. How are you going to rule? I was thinking about that earlier today, and I can honestly tell you, as fiercely independent as I consider myself and a free thinker, I'm always talking about freeing your mind. At the same time, I wouldn't want to free my checkbook. Does that make any sense? You have kids that you have to feed. This would make, I think this would make almost anyone think. Do you guys agree? But put in the comments. Let me know what you think. The regular folks that listen to me, let me know what you think about that. The question is real simple. Do you understand the judge's position, considering he has a family to take care of? And do you think it is based on that fact that he was thinking of his family and keeping his job, considering he's probably got as many as 2 challengers for his seat? And one of the challengers is that guy, let's see, I don't have his name right in front of me, but that one individual that is a former, I think he's currently still serves on the Rainbow Push Coalition. So he's a black man that has very deep roots in activism and this type of thing. So it's probably going to be a very populist message to that Democratic county. That's just the way I see it. So we'll go from there. Sapphire, let's see, corrupt Fani will find a way to keep Wade. I don't think that's going to happen, but I could be wrong. We'll have to wait and see how that works out. It is amazing, though, that the judge kept her with all of this evidence. It's like in reading the pleadings, it's like he just chose to ignore everything. He just chose to find a way. And you know, we did talk about this. We did discuss this in detail. The judge is the trier of fact in this situation. It's not a trial. It's kind of a bench decision is the best way to say it. And he can choose to look at the evidence, the witnesses, the impeachment of these witnesses any way he wants to. As the trier of fact, he calls the balls, he calls the strikes. It's just just the way it is. Chris, what do you got here? How is it really a choice for Fani? Seems like it's equivalent to a dismissal of only Wade. There's no choice here that I can see. Yeah, well, it's nonsensical order. I guess I agree. That's it's not good either way you slice it up. But it's just really shocking considering the amount of evidence that these individuals were facing. And I don't know. Obviously, there's a lot of talking heads discussing this right now. I was kind of soaking it all in from early this morning for the last couple hours just to kind of see where everybody's at on this. Let's just listen to a couple of videos before we start drilling down on this, and let's see exactly what everybody's saying. It's kind of interesting also to see the difference in Fox News, which we're going to take a peek at first, and then flipping over to CNN. They kind of look at it as two different worlds, as usual. Like, that's a big shock, right? They always look at things from two different sides. So here we go. Let's get in this and listen to this for a minute.
Jonathan Turley with us on the phone, I believe. On camera.
Yes, you
Jonathan, do. Good morning. Good to have you with us. Your headline take as you take all of this in this morning.
Well, we've been talking about this possibility of a Solomon-esque type of ruling by the court to take Wade off and leave Willis. The reason that's attractive is it avoids the cliff problem. You know, if he took Willis off the case, he'd have to take the entire office out of the mix. He'd have to reassign this to another set of prosecutors. That would cause considerable delay. It could also cause the dismissal of the case if those new prosecutors looked at this racketeering theory and said, like many of us, wow, this doesn't really hold together very well. So this avoided the cliff, but it did not avoid the questions that will inevitably come up. You know, it's like, you know, finding two people in a bank vault and taking one off to jail. I mean, the question is, you know, the appearance problem that the judge identified with regard to Wade was directly related to his relationship with Willis. They both testified in the same way. They were the two parts of this relationship. And yet only one of them was disqualified. And so that's going to lead to these questions. I mean, well, why should Willis escape that same penalty? The opinion leaves us feeling like the court went and shot the wounded.
Yeah, it's a great question. And there is always the question, unfortunately, of politics and the influence of politics potentially on this, because these are elected officials. They are up for election again in May. I believe all of the people involved here are up for, including the judge, up for election in May. So that may be why Judge Scott McAfee wanted to speak on his own behalf before this decision came down. And he spoke with WSB TV, and this is what he said. The message I want to convey is no ruling of mine is ever going to be based on politics. I'm going to be following the law the best I understand it. I just focus on the job I'm doing. I'm incredibly grateful for the last year I've been able to do this. I took this job not because I wanted to score partisan political points, didn't go looking for the spotlight. I did it because I love the law and giving people their day in court and being efficient about it.
I don't know if I totally agree with what he is saying right there, but we'll continue on.
So, Jonathan, you know, there will be speculation that this was a political move on his part. It's the easier road for him to take in many ways to leave Fani Willis in this spot. But judging based on what you watched in the courtroom, do you think that's fair?
Well, I have to say that I've been praising the judge, and I still believe that he has conducted himself in a fair and professional way. I think that this does take an element of courage for an elected state judge, because many people in Fulton County are not going to like the fact that he just disqualified Wade and gave credence to this theory of an improper relationship, an appearance issue that does touch upon Willis and her office.
You know, I think he makes a good point that I want to just comment on briefly. It is true that the fact he removed Wade off of this case is probably still going to have negative consequences for him in the upcoming election, because they're in Fulton County. They're not going to be happy that he removed a black man as the lead prosecutor of this case. So sometimes, folks, when you split the baby, you're not going to have the intended effect that you want by pleasing both sides. I think I might reconsider my earlier position had I been Judge Scott McAfee in this case. You need to make a decision and come down on one way or the other. The splitting the baby thing generally just makes both sides mad at you.
That's all for the good. The problem is the disjointed aspect of the opinion itself. It doesn't really hold together that well. The big question was, what is the standard? Is it just an appearance, or do you have to show an actual conflict?
That's right.
He indicates that he believes it is indeed the appearance standard. Well, if that's the case, I don't see how Willis could escape disqualification.
I've always been talking about that. What is the standard the judge is going to use? And he claims he used the appearance standard, which in my mind, and I realize there's other attorneys that differ with me on this, but generally the appearance standard is the lowest type of standard. If it just looks wrong, she's got to go. But there's no way he applied that standard here.
Many people believe that both of these prosecutors lied on the stand, that there were false statements submitted to courts. The key about that is Willis and Wade are prosecuting people in this case for that very conduct.
That's right.
And so it's hard to see how Willis continuing the case does not undermine it in the eyes of the public and hurts the case overall. In some ways, this result may actually appeal to Trump and his defendants. They established that there was an improper relationship, at least for the purposes of disqualification, and they left a wounded Willis to continue on in the case. And she will stand accused of false statements as she prosecutes others for that type of conduct. And keep in mind, there are state efforts now to fully investigate this, including possible bar issues.
Yeah, the Georgia Senate has opened its own investigation. It's a great point because legally now the Trump team has the option to question her credibility all throughout the course of this, based on some of what we've seen so far in this.
Yeah, so the wheels haven't fallen off entirely, but they sure are wobbly at the moment. I'm Steve Ducey.
I'm Brian
Okay,
Kilmeade.
so while I'm switching videos here, I want to go ahead and tell you exactly why, despite what seems kind of gloom and doom, I want everybody to smile once again, and I don't want anybody to panic or jump off anything, because I'm going to tell you why this is actually good news for former President Donald Trump. I have said for a long time, when it comes to this case, you do not want an attorney at law. You want an attorney at stall. Now, it doesn't look like it's stalling, does it? Think again. If you look at the statement that was released by President Trump's attorney, Steve Sado, he hinted very clearly that he's going to appeal. Now, remember, we've talked about this. Generally, an appeal is something that you can only conduct at the end of the entire proceeding. And that kind of makes sense, right? You have a trial, the jury comes back, you're found guilty, whatever, and then you appeal. You have to generally appeal in what they call the final record. However, there is something called an interlocutory appeal. Just a big word. That's just what they call it. And what that means is there are times where, and it depends on state law, it depends on the judge, it depends on a number of factors, specifically the state you're in and what the law is as far as an interlocutory appeal is permissible. But the bottom line is you can appeal while the trial is going on, or in this case, during the course of this particular case. Technically, there's not a jury in front of them right now, so it's not technically that. But it's for our conversation, it's the same thing. Generally speaking, when you do that, it has to be because there is something very, very serious that if the appeals court does not intervene, it is going to cause great harm to a defendant or defendants. And I'm talking in generalities, but my understanding, that's generally the standard I have seen. I have actually used it in a civil context before. Again, I'm not a practicing attorney. I'm talking about my business career and the individuals that I have personally hired and cases I have seen. And frankly, just fellow individuals, friends, family members, just colleagues that I know that have had generally it's civil issues over the years. And I've told you before, one of my very best friends is a retired Dallas, Texas defense attorney. That's what he practiced all his life. So I learned a lot of this from him, and he handled a lot of business-related civil matters for me because, like a lot of these defense attorneys, just like Nathan Wade, for that matter, who does a little bit of everything, specifically personal injury, my friend mainly focused on criminal defense, but he would handle contract disputes, contract law, this type of things. And that was the main capacity that I used him. And we became friends like 30 some years ago. So that's where all that stems from as far as my personal experience, just to give you a quick background on the situation. But this is great news for Donald Trump because this is more stall. What his attorneys are going to do, they're going to appeal this. And let me tell you why this appeal is going to work. Remember, it really doesn't matter if Donald Trump wins or if Mike Roman specifically, he was the original defendant via attorney Ashley Merchant that we've talked extensively about. All that matters is that this is delayed, that this is put off, because this Georgia case is the only case that if Donald Trump wins and becomes the next president again, that he cannot dismiss by himself, simply by a pardon, or simply by telling his Department of Justice to make this go away, to fire Jack Smith, to close this case out. Now, having said that, that doesn't mean he's not without recourse against Fani Willis or any of these individuals should he become president. And obviously, as president of the United States, they can't touch him. They have to wait till he leaves office. Being the executive branch of the federal government, a little lowly DA in a county in Georgia has no jurisdiction over the president. Additionally, we have this little matter before the Supreme Court, where the Supreme Court is going to hear the president's arguments that he has immunity as president of the United States. And, you know, at first when I heard that immunity claim, I was thinking to myself, I'm not exactly sure what the Supreme Court is going to do about that, because it just sounds like a terrible thing that someone could commit crimes as president and then they could essentially get away with it. But the more I got thinking about it and looking at case law pertaining to the Supreme Court that loosely touches upon these type subjects. Generally, it's in a civil context, or it's back even as far back as the Nixon administration and dealing with civil type of matters. But it has to be that way for a president, because think about this. If a president has to worry about leaving office and he's handcuffed and led away because some city prosecutor or some prosecutor like Fani Willis is trying to make a name for herself, or Letitia James is waiting for whatever, because let's say he ordered an attack into a country, and yet now he's going to be charged with some kind of manslaughter because people died as a result of his decisions. How about Joe Biden? He ordered the troops to withdraw from Afghanistan, and it was a terrible withdrawal. And what was there, 13 soldiers that were killed at the airport during one phase of the withdrawal? He could face involuntary manslaughter for that decision. And the list goes on and on and on. I firmly believe that the Supreme Court, again, other pundits are saying this is not the case. I honestly think that he has a shot of having absolute immunity. And if he doesn't have absolute immunity, I'm very confident that the Supreme Court is going to say that if anything is connected to his official capacity in his job as president of the United States, he is immune. And that would work for Donald Trump too, because it would go back to each and every case. He would say this was during my official acts as president. And then again, that has to be appealed all the way up to the Supreme Court for them to decide if each and every action was in the course of his job as president of the United States. Again, if the Supreme Court doesn't put a stop to it, it's going to get really messy, and it's going to severely weaken the office of the president of the United States. So we'll have to stay tuned as far as that goes. But in relation to the Fani Willis, this BS RICO case, this is fantastic news for Donald Trump, because there is going to be an interlocutory appeal, which basically means this whole case is on hold. There's no way this case goes to trial before the November election. No way, no how, no sir. Generally, in a RICO type case, which this case is not a RICO case, it never should have been brought as a RICO case. It is a tool, as we've discussed, for mobsters, for organized crime activities. The funny thing is, a lot of these defendants in this so-called RICO case never even knew each other. They never even met. How can you have racketeering, conspiracy, essentially, when you never talk to one another? So it's really hard to see this case continue and to stay together. Generally, when you pick a jury for this particular type of case, it may take a month, if not a year, just to pick a jury that would be qualified to hear this type of case, not to mention the evidence and the time that the defense would have to take to basically go through the evidence and put on a defense. Remember, the Willis administration has been investigating this case with Nathan Wade ever since 2021, specifically, and at least November 1st, 2021, when she hired Nathan Wade to start looking into this case. Obviously, they have drawn this out as an effort to put money and enrich themselves and take vacations together and do all kinds of things like this. If they would have indicted former President Trump way back then they would not be able to stretch out the time and to keep billing and milking, frankly, the taxpayers of Fulton County and or the COVID funds that they tapped. So they have a lot of problems to deal with. But the interlocutory appeal, remember that in the back of your mind. Everybody else is telling you this is terrible news. It's a loss for Donald Trump. Friends, that's just simply not the case. And I think in short order, you'll see an appeal filed. Generally, you have about 30 days after an order to go ahead and file an appeal. I believe an interlocutory appeal, they don't have to wait 30 days. They can probably just go ahead and file it. And I would suspect that they're probably going to file an appeal very, very quickly. So let's go ahead and take a look at the CNN. I like the way that they put just a little bit of a different spin on this. They're talking about how this case smells. The title is "This Thing Smells." And of course, that's putting it mildly, right? So we'll be right back in 1 second. Here we go.
This is what I'm reading in the language. The prosecution of this case cannot proceed until the state selects one of two options. So very clear there. He's saying you cannot go forward unless what?
One of you has to go. Either the DA and with her the entire office, or Nathan Wade. This will be the easiest decision the DA's office has ever had to make. Obviously, Nathan Wade will go. And the judge in his ruling says essentially this is necessary to preserve public confidence in this case. He says there's enough of an appearance. There's enough of, as he says at one point, an odor of mendacity around this case. Interesting phrase, that something's got to be done to at least clean up the public perception.
Smells.
Yes, of mendacity, whatever that smells like.
But seriously, but this gets what you're talking about. This
yes.
whole thing was so messy, and that's what Michael Moore was saying. And this could have been nipped in the bud.
Right. Again, it's really important to underscore here. The big takeaway: Fani Willis stays on the case. The DA's office keeps the case. The case can carry on. That is far and away the bold headline. They have survived, but not without substantial damage. I mean, there is some really stark language in this ruling. The judge calls out the DA's, quote, tremendous lack in judgment, the odor of mendacity. He says that the speech, the public speech she made in the church was, quote, legally improper. And the judge even says in the ruling, it may be time for a gag order on the DA because she keeps on making improper public statements. He leaves it out there. He doesn't say I'm issuing one, but he raises the possibility of a gag order on the DA. I mean, look, there's gag orders on Donald Trump because we collectively fear that he may be tainting the jury pool. And now the judge floats the same possibility. So the DA's office has survived. The case survives. It will roll on. At what pace, we'll see. But there's some damage done here.
Joining us now, CNN Chief Legal Affairs Correspondent Paula Reed, National Correspondent Kristen Holmes, and on my left, Chief Legal Analyst Laura Coates, Legal Analyst Elliot Williams. I am not used to having so many people with me when I'm doing it. I mean, it's an embarrassment of riches. I don't know who to go to first, but I'll go to Paula first. You've been leading this coverage a good part of this morning. I have no idea how. I mean, I guess she stays on the case. Fani Willis stays on the case, but it just feels like this is not good. It just feels, I mean, let's read this one part of the ruling. This finding is by no means an indication that the court condones this tremendous lapse in judgment or the unprofessional manner of the district attorney's testimony during the evidentiary hearing. I mean, it just sounds like, yes, the case continues, but it almost feels like, is it going to hobble along? I mean, what do you think?
Let's put this in the larger context. At some point, Trump's lawyers are going to have to defend him in a court of law, maybe not this year, based on the facts and the law. But until then, they have two goals. The first is to delay all four of his criminal trials. The other is to sow distrust in the criminal justice system. And what we've
Did you hear that delay comment? I don't hear many attorneys saying that, but that's exactly right. You want to delay.
seen down in Fulton County over the past few months has helped him with both of those goals. And this language today, where the judge describes Fani Willis as having, quote, a lapse in judgment, calls her unprofessional on the stand, said she repeatedly made bad choices, and insinuates that she lied. He describes a significant appearance of impropriety that infects the current structure of the prosecution team and basically says, look, your office can recuse or you can get rid of your lead prosecutor. So while, yes, this is about Fani Willis's fate in terms of leading this, there's something much more at stake, which is trust in the judicial system. So anyone who says that this is a win for Fani Willis, it's a technical victory, But I would argue this helps the Trump team.
Yeah,
I agree.
And Christian, I do want to ask you about the political implications because Trump's going to run wild with this. But Laura, I mean, I have to go to you. Why let her stay on the case if you're going to go after her in this way so publicly? Tremendous lapse in judgment and so on. I mean, it sounds to me like a gift to the defense. If they want to appeal, they want to tie this up further.
This absolutely gives them ammunition to try to attack her credibility and taint their own version of the jury pool to try to undermine. And this is in combination with an earlier this week decision to remove and dismiss some of these charges for not having been what they call properly pled. They were too insufficient, too lacking in detail to have them be able to prepare for a defense. You combine those two things, they will use this to suggest that she should not be trying this case. But if she is, then hey, she's not good enough to actually have a burden of proof met. But this is actually pretty extraordinary as a result. The judge did not have the legal basis to say that an appearance of a conflict was enough to remove. He does talk about the fact that there was the lapse in judgment. He does not condone it, but they did not meet their burden, those who are moving for this particular case, disqualifier, to say that this goes to the heart of the defendant's ability to get a fair trial. All of these salacious details, and we leaned in for the gossip, I certainly did. But when it comes down to it, none of this trial had anything to do with the underlying facts of this case. Even the speech that has been referenced by Nick Valencia and others, where she talks about what they called playing the race card, identifying why are you just going after one of my prosecutors, not the rest of them.
Yeah.
Even that, he said, did not rise to the level of disqualification. So yes, this takes a hit. But he did say they are so far removed from the actual jury selection to provide a permanent taint on a jury pool. He knows this is down the road. Amnesia might set in.
Yeah, and Elliot, it may help Fani Willis's case. I mean, if the case is delayed to some extent, because it does provide a little distance between now and when this case gets going, I suppose. I mean, that would be music to the Trump team's ears as well. But
I totally disagree with that. Any delay is bad news. Sapphire, your comment is right on point, though. Robert Goff, I'm not sure who that is, but at any rate, if let's see here, Fani is so incompetent. Yeah, there is a case to be made that if she does end up replacing Nathan Wade, which I'm sure she's going to replace Nathan Wade, unless she appeals herself, which I can't imagine that they would actually appeal this because it will delay the case. I know that Trump's team and probably Merchant and the other defendants will appeal this particular ruling, but hiring someone that actually is competent would be the right thing to do if they're going to proceed with the case. As a matter of fact, one of the other three prosecutors literally wrote a book on RICO law in the state of Georgia, yet he was paid, what was it, half or a third to a half what Nathan Wade was paid, despite what sweet Fani Willis said in court.
But I mean, I just want to show that the part that the judge says about Nathan Wade. Mm-hmm. I mean, this is also brutal, patently unpersuasive explanation for the inaccurate interrogatories he submitted in his pending divorce case indicates a willingness on his part to wrongly conceal his relationship with the district attorney. As the case moves forward, reasonable members of the public could easily be left to wonder whether the financial exchanges have continued.
Well, that's a heck of an indictment, ain't it? Right there by the judge, Fulton County decision. Wade's patently unpersuasive explanation for the inaccurate interrogatories. Now, remember, this was the interrogatories that Wade submitted to his soon-to-be ex-wife, Jocelyn Wade, as far as the normal discovery disclosure process, which he just outright lied. Interrogatories he submitted in his pending divorce indicates a willingness on his part to wrongly conceal his relationship with the district attorney. And as the case moves forward, reasonable members of the public could easily be left to wonder whether the financial exchanges have continued, resulting in some form of benefit to the district attorney. I totally agree with the judge. I still don't get how he arrived at that ruling other than what I've previously stated, but we're going to continue
to result in some form of benefit to the district attorney, or even whether the romantic relationship has resumed. And as Laura was saying, I mean, this has nothing to do with, I mean, as Fani Willis said, I'm not the one on trial. Trump and these co-defendants are on trial, but the judge just goes after Fani Willis and Nathan Wade as if they were on trial.
Absolutely, and there's other language along those lines where, and I was just trying to find it here. Whereas I think
what he forgets to say is Fani Willis and Nathan Wade are on trial. At least they were on trial for the purposes of that Pacific hearing. This play that they were not on trial That's just not correct. It's false. It's a false narrative.
The possible mendacity, I think is the word he uses, referring to Fani Willis and Nathan Wade. Now, it is important for any judge writing an opinion like this to substantiate how he's landing at the decision he's coming to. And some of that is assessing the credibility of witnesses. Can I, as the finder of fact and law, actually believe the things that are being said to me? Now, a number of these statements sort of toe the line of, is this a credibility finding or are you taking a pot shot at the prosecutor? And there were a few. So for instance, one of them referring to Fani Willis being unprofessional on the witness stand serves no purpose whatsoever. It doesn't speak to the witness's actual credibility.
She was angry.
She was angry, right? Now, don't get me wrong. That's great. Like Laura says, to the human element of all this, some of the intrigue and so on, but it doesn't help. Now I have to push back on you a little bit, Jim, that even if this trial is delayed, nothing in here helps Fani Willis and her case. And the point that Chris and I were talking about a little bit earlier,
that's right.
A lot of this actually sort of hurts the credibility of the office. That said, there's a difference between the legal correctness and sort of the political or moral correctness of all of it. And legally, this is sound. You do not have a basis for removing this prosecutor from the case, but there's all kinds of political stuff that we can talk about.
And this is happening in the middle of a political campaign, obviously, Kristen. And Trump is going to run wild with this. He's already been doing it out on the campaign trail at these rallies, talking about Fani Willis and Nathan Wade.
Yeah, he's obsessed
it almost sounds like Strzok and Lisa Page. It's the same thing.
Very.
Don't y'all love how they spin this on these other channels, these liberal channels? Are you catching this? Trump is going to run wild with this. Are you kidding me? Of course he's going to run wild with this. He's trying to defend himself from being put in a cage. It's just amazing how they spin this. It intrigues me to watch the difference from one news station to the other.
Very similar.
Yeah.
I mean, look, I'm sitting at a table with lawyers, and I am not a legal person, but I can tell you.
Well, you are a legal person.
I am
just
not a
saying.
legal lawyer. I don't have a legal background.
See, that's what happens when you're lawyers.
So when I look through this, I see how Donald Trump's team is going to take advantage of it. Now, they said what you would expect for them to say, which was that they were disappointed. We got a statement from Trump's lawyer, Steve Sadow. He essentially said, while respecting the court's decision, we believe that the court did not afford appropriate significance to the prosecutorial misconduct of Willis and Wade, including the financial benefits.
This is the statement I was talking about earlier. This, if you read it, it's very clear. The interlocutory appeal is coming. So it is, it's extremely right on spot. So while respecting the court's decision, we believe that the court did not afford appropriate significance to the prosecutorial misconduct of Willis and Wade, including the financial benefits, testifying untruthfully about when their personal relationship began, as well as Willis's. Let's continue.
Testifying untruthfully about when their personal relationship began, as well as Willis' extrajudicial MLK.
Yeah, extrajudicial MLK church speech. I have that church speech racked up as we go through some of these pleadings in a little bit. When I need a break or when it comes up in the pleadings, I want to switch over and just remind everybody exactly the blasphemy and the nuttiness and frankly, the improperness of her church speech that should have been enough on its face by itself to have her disqualified, but apparently it was not. But it goes on the church speech where she played the race card and falsely accused the defendants and their counsel of racism. We will use all legal options. So this is the phrase right here. We will use all legal options available as we continue to fight to end this case, which should never have been brought in the first place. So I don't know how else you would interpret that. We will use all legal options available as we continue, and this is it, to fight, meaning they're not giving up on this particular motion to disqualify to end this case. To end this case is the disqualification motion. And I guess you could take it one step further and say that the whole case should be tossed out. So I don't know how you read that, but I think that is pretty self-explanatory.
Church speech where she played the race card and falsely accused the defendants of their counsel of racism. Then he continues and says, we will use all legal options available to continue to fight to end this case, which should have never been brought in the first place. That's exactly what you would expect, right?
Sure.
That they're not happy, Fani Willis gets to stay on the case, that moving forward, they want this case to be dismissed. However, when you actually look at how they're going to use this, Donald Trump is going to repeat some of these lines in rallies. Oh, yeah. And I'm getting a lot of pushback already online for saying that,
Donald Trump is going to use this and his supporters are going to eat this up. But this is what I've seen for the last several years. Donald Trump takes some of these nuggets of truth.
Yeah, who pushed back on that?
Exactly. Well, the internet. So, but Donald takes a nugget of truth and fact from this report and then will blow it up, and his people will believe him. And not just his people, he will be able to reach other people by using this.
Isn't that funny how they put that? His people will believe him. He'll take a nugget of truth. In other words, he's lying. That's what she's saying to his people. In other words, the deplorables, these MAGA individuals that don't have a brain cell to function on. And folks, this is what these liberals, this is what these kooks, this is what they believe. And the reason why you see them on television all the time is because there are certain professions that, just as a matter of science, maybe, that they're attracted to this type of profession. So these people that are liberal have a tendency to migrate towards a news. Now they're not all like that, but the overwhelming majority of them are going to be Democratic, or at least of the liberal persuasion. Another example would be teachers, educators. And that's one of the reasons we have a problem in schools and specifically in college. I told you about my daughter the other day. She's an educator. I believe she teaches sixth grade. It's just the way she was taught, not by me, but through the school system, and specifically in college, they're indoctrinated. And that's one of my main missions, as y'all know all too well.
That is the tactic he has used since 2016.
I will say, I mean, yes, this is, as you mentioned, Paula, it's a win-ish. But there is a lot of good information in here to actually buttress the credibility of Fani Willis. It might be surprising. One part in particular, this judge called BS on the idea that the people who brought this motion had proven that the money that was given as a salary was a through line to what was used for the vacation. It was their burden, just like it'll be the burden of the prosecutors at trial to make their case. Also, another aspect of here that they said, this was the theory of the defense's case, and the defense meaning the Trump and counsel, that they were bringing this case and prolonging this case in an effort to sustain their romantic relationship. Go to West Virginia and drive there, or Nashville at different points in time. The judge essentially said, well, that can't be true, that she was trying to prolong. Not only did she ask for a trial date in 6 months after she brought this case, she said that she didn't want to sever these defendants. She wanted them all to stay together. Everything that she was doing was trying to expedite this case, which belies what they were trying to articulate. And so on that realm, she has some legs to stand on. I do agree. This judge, if you thought Robert Hur's one line about Biden was problematic, this is a whole opinion.
Well, this gives us a good look at exactly what the problem is with the news. And, you have to admit, it's actually kind of a positive thing. Our country is so great. We are so blessed. We have so many blessings. And one of the many blessings that we have is, hey, you get the news the way you want it. It's like we have the news Burger King. It's made your way. If you have a certain persuasion, you can watch Fox News. If you're over here on the other side of the equation, you can watch MSNBC or CNN. You just go ahead and take your pick. So I guess in that way, it's kind of good as far as just another blessing. But the problem is people become indoctrinated. People are not told the truth. People believe things that are not true. It's really just that simple. And before I get into the comments, I just want to introduce myself again real quickly to everyone. I am J.R. Dukes. I appreciate everyone joining me. I am here to help you understand better, because I'm a firm believer that if you understand better, you can live better. Living your best life possible is what I'm all about. I am here to end indoctrination. That's my whole story. And I tried to do that through simply taking common events that we all are sharing together, politics, anything that is essentially in the news or that is mainstream, because you deserve the truth. We all deserve to have a discussion about what is going on and what is the best way forward. And I call it like I see it. If it happens to be a conservative viewpoint that I agree with, or even on the other side of the equation, if I see it, I'll call it out. And I never ask anybody to believe what I believe. I never tried to indoctrinate or push my beliefs on anyone. My goal, as I just said, is to help you understand better and make your own mind up, which I call freeing your mind, thinking for yourself. It's just that simple. So moving on, Sherry, thanks for joining us again. Yeah, it's beyond unbelievable. McAfee caved, and yes, he did cave. I agree with those sentiments 100%. But timing of a new judge candidate also stinks to high heaven. As if a great threat, as if against him was enough to make his mind to rule this. Sorry, I can't read today apparently, but I understand what you're saying. And this is the reason why, folks, these elected judges are a bad thing. I have always had that feeling. That is just my opinion. And if there's anything good about all of this that's been going on with Donald Trump, we are seeing the justice system for what it is. And listen, you know, I've said before, I bleed red, white, and blue. I am a patriot. I love our country. I firmly believe we have the best country that God ever gave the permission to grace the face of the earth. I believe we are here to do good. I believe America is inherently a good country, a great country. And I believe because America exists, the world is a better place. Just full stop. I have nothing more to add to that. That's just my humble opinion. At the same time, nothing's perfect. And I believe that even in a community like this, sometimes we have a small gathering. Sometimes we have a couple thousand people in the chat. The bottom line is you never know who you're reaching out to that can actually make a difference. And to start making a difference is that we all have to talk, work together, and most importantly, get out the vote, share videos like this with people that you know are indoctrinated. Maybe it's your own kids, maybe it's your spouse, maybe it's a neighbor. I don't know, but it can definitely make a difference. One thing that I like about the channel that I currently have is my statistic on sharing. People sharing the videos that I make is pretty impressive. I forgot exactly what the count was for this past week, but it's humbling, it's impressive, and it makes me feel like I may be having a difference on certain matters one way or the other. So anyway, that's my 2 cents on that. I appreciate that. Sapphire Ridge Acres, always appreciate having you in the comments. You're always making spot on comments and we appreciate it. And yes, I've heard many different acronyms, I guess, for CNN, and Communist News Network is definitely one of them that is accurate. No doubt about it. They love the way they are and they don't make any apologies about it. To their credit, they're not on the fence. They pick a path. They're definitely not the Judge Scott McAfee of the news, if you know what I'm saying. He's not. They're not going to split the baby. They're going to go straight forward on it. So anyway, can Trump use this decision to push for appointment of all judges? He could do whatever he wants to try to do on a federal level if he is indeed, hopefully, reelect as president of the United States. I will tell you one thing I know that he will do, even in this Fani Willis case. He may not have a direct way of dealing with this case as far as stopping it, but that doesn't mean that him and his allies cannot do what Biden has done, and that is basically weaponize the Department of Justice and other agencies. I would hope he wouldn't do it out of retribution. I don't know. Maybe there's a small part of me that thinks he should, because these people are so ridiculous and have stuck it to him for so long. But if he wants to be great and he wants to step above it all, what he could do and what he probably will do is put some kind of panel together or some kind of investigative team together to look into what has happened in New York City and what's happening and what has happened in this Fani Willis case and what's going on with these rogue prosecutors, district attorneys, these rogue solicitors. This has to be stopped, and we need to look at what other people are doing around the world and see if we can't better our own departments of justice. In all fairness, as I've said, this type of nonsense has been going on for a very, very long time. It's just the fact that this is in the public light very clearly for everyone to see. But I have seen this myself many times where if you're on the wrong side of a political decision, or if you make let's just say the wrong person mad at you, and that individual is politically connected and they carry all the resources, faith, and credit of the state government and or the federal government, you, my friend, have a serious problem. Donald Trump's in a unique position because he can fight back. Number one, he's got the money to fight back. And number two, he'll literally have the power to fight back if things work out the way we're hoping that they work out. So make no mistake about it. This is something that's real. This two-tier justice system. It may even be more than 2 tiers, depending on what we're talking about and where we're talking about. If you have money, if you have political clout, if you're considered a good person, they treat you one way. If not, well, we know what happens. It's a shame. And I hate to say it, but it's true. I actually have a family member. Their mind is so closed. They're the kind of person that believes this. If they see someone being arrested, they're thinking to themselves, oh, that person must be guilty, or they must have done something. Otherwise, why is the police bothering them? And it's just kind of the mentality that individuals have. I understand the mentality, but it's wrong. And you have to expose light to it. I'm a firm and proud supporter of the police. So I'm not picking on the police, but it's everywhere. It's just like this court thing with Donald Trump. You just have these rogue solicitors trying to make a name for themselves, district attorneys or whatever, and they decide to drop the hammer. And at the same time, let's just be straight up about it. Fani Willis, Nathan Wade, these people are crooks. Just straight up, they're just crooked. They are engaging in one of the worst crimes, in my opinion, and that is public corruption. They're taking your money, my money, and they're enriching themselves with it. It's really just that simple. So. And share this. This is an O.J. Simpson case, hearing different left comments about race being vindicated as if this was about race, all about corruption, and Wade Willis happened to be. But yeah, you're exactly right. And it's so unfortunate. Nowadays in our society, a lot of candidates, if they are a minority, look at Bob Menendez in New Jersey, the senator that's been indicted again for all types of different corruption. When he was first indicted in this particular round, because he was indicted a long time ago when he beat those charges, but in this particular thing, his first response was, and I'm paraphrasing, it's people coming after a Hispanic man. That was his defense, is that he's being hammered because he's Hispanic. It's a shame. These people should be ashamed of themselves. What are you doing? You've been in Congress for years and years. You're living the American dream. I don't want to hear this nonsense that people are going after you because of the color of your brown skin. It's irritating and it's embarrassing. And Fani Willis, they have made an art out of playing this race card, and it is so obvious. And I'm assuming at some point people have to be sick of it. Just sick of hearing that. If she continues and other people continue, all they're teaching other minority individuals to do is to be a victim, That's what Clarence Thomas told Jackson Brown, the newest justice member. They had a little spat over the last affirmative action case, and the Jackson Brown was saying something to the effect of, hey, anybody that doesn't believe race is not a real factor in our society is just not being honest with themselves. And I love the way Thomas snapped back at her, and he said, unfortunately, lady, what you did today is you made every Black American a victim. And that's true. And I'm glad he's there to call out the nonsense, to call out this nonsense about race. It has to stop. Incidentally, if you ever wondered why Clarence Thomas is the way he is, even though he is a very dark-skinned Black man, and he hates this race stuff as much as I do, the reason is real simple. I read one of his books, maybe the only book, I don't know how many, but a book that he wrote. It was an autobiography of some sort. And what it turns out is when he was younger, if your skin color is like darker than one of those brown lunch bags, the Black population or your Black neighbors treat you one way versus if you're lighter skin. And that really irritated him. And even though he graduated, I think it was Harvard University, he said everybody looked at him as nothing more than a product of affirmative action. And he said, I worked hard, I busted my you-know-what to get in, and I put myself through this law school. And now when people look at me, they just assume that I'm a product of affirmative action, and that's the only reason I achieved what I achieved, and that I am in the position that I am in. And I get that. I could imagine that would have to feel him full of rage and anger, everything taken together. And that's the reason why he hates affirmative action so bad. And folks, let's be honest about it. When a Black man has become the president of the United States for 8 years, it's very, very difficult, at least for me, to understand that people should be treated and given special benefits because of their race or because of their sex or because of any other factor that they're just born with. It has to stop. As Chief Justice Roberts says, if it's real simple, if you want to stop making a box and separating people by the color of their skin, then the way you solve that is you stop it. You stop making boxes to put people in by the color of their skin. We all should do what MLK Jr. suggested, and that is you should judge an individual not by the color of their skin, but the content of their character, by their good works, by what they do, by their character. Are they a good person? Do they try to help people? Do they follow the law? You list it out. You know what I'm talking about, right? To me, it makes pretty good sense. But make no mistake about it, Sweet Fani here has a long history of pulling out this race card all the time. She pulls it out all the time. Matter of fact, I don't know if we covered this here or not. There was, I think Steve Saldo brought it up in court. I don't remember, but here's the bottom line. The defense attorneys that are currently serving in this particular case, one of the communications that they had with the DA Willis administration, she was hammering them because they were mad. She did not apparently return their calls fast enough. To clarify, the defense attorneys were upset. She didn't do something fast enough, return calls, get documents, whatever. And she had her secretary, or whatever the person's title was, contact them back or email them back, whatever. And it was a scathing rebuke. And it was basically telling them, because we're black, you think you can treat us like this, or we're black females, you think you can treat us like, it's just nonsense. And it just has to stop, and it has to be called out for what it is. I hope I'm making sense on this. If y'all agree, someone wants to let me know, I'd appreciate that. The race card was used in a church to gain acceptance. That's exactly right. It's a shame. It's a shame that they allowed her to do that in church. You know, when I go to church, it's generally because I'm there to try to get my soul saved. You know, I have never been in church where the preacher has done something to the effect where he just gives a platform for someone to go up there and spew nonsense. I've never seen it in any church I've ever been in. I don't know. Maybe that's the new thing. I don't know. You just invite someone up to come in and take over the pulpit and just start spewing that nonsense. Let's go ahead and take a quick peek at this here. We'll look at a few of her comments just to remind us of this nonsense. This was at Big Bethel AME Church. It's in Atlanta. And let's just remind ourselves of a little bit of this here. I'll kind of bounce around to some of the more important parts. So let's take a peek at this and let's see what you think.
You know, I have some notes here, and at some points I'll go to them, and at some points I'm just going to stray from them. But I hope y'all will be patient with me. The bishop told me I am welcome to be myself. In this very historic house of God. How many of y'all know that's what Bethel means? House of God. There is literally no place in the world I'd rather be than right here with you today. God always brings you to that safe place where you need to be. And so the invitation to come where God's message is taught, adhered to, and celebrated is my honor. I want to
speak through a little bit of this so we can hear the important parts.
First of all, my Savior, Lord Jesus Christ. But also his humble servant, Richard Jackson. Supervisor Christy Davis Jackson, Presiding Elder Hudson, Reverend Dr. John Foster, Sister Mary Ann Foster. Here I stand to talk to you this morning. See, that part's funny, that's not God. Now I must warn you, if you are looking today, this morning, to hear from a perfect person, well, he was crucified and he died for your sins.
Amen. She's definitely not a perfect person.
She is his very flawed, hard-headed, and imperfect servant.
Well, that's the understatement, isn't it?
And so I pray for him to please use me this morning. Some people are in this place to hear the word of God. Others are here for other reasons, but my God got a way of making sure no matter why you came, you leave with his message.
It's just really sickening they gave her this platform.
So the theme being celebrated today is, it starts with me. I want somebody to repeat that. It starts with me. Shifting the cultural climate through the study and practice of Dr. King's nonviolent philosophy. Servant before you. So I want to talk to you today about what it's required to be a soldier in this warfare, and that's what it is. How much are you personally willing to sacrifice for the greater good and his purpose? And he's told me often, you see how
I have to pop through this because she's got about 30 minutes of this garbage.
A wonderful man in law enforcement while I was out here real single, y'all. She was a mother. She was not yet a mother at the time, and I was raising 2 children. I saw
she's giving her life story of just how she's had it really bad and how rough it was.
District attorneys in this country are women of color. Why should I, your lowly servant, get this honor? But then this job began. Wait a minute, God.
She's getting into it.
You forgot to tell me there was more than 50,000 cases not closed. You left that detail out. Wait a minute, God. 18,000 unindicted cases going back 7 years? So regularly? I now think it's not normal.
She's basically telling you how bad she had to work, and I'm assuming all those vacations she takes all the time, she just barely had time for those because all that case backlog.
If I don't have 2 death threats a week. God, you did not tell me that people would call me the N-word more than they call me Fani. You did not tell me as a woman of color, it would not matter what I did. My motive, my talent, my ability, and my character would be constantly attacked.
Good.
You did not tell me that the people
it's painful.
Stronger. See, I sit here with a piece that surpasses
Oh my
name
goodness.
calling, the being doxxed multiple times. God, you never told me.
Y'all get the flair of that. I can't handle any more of that. That's just I cannot believe a church would go through and allow her to spew that type of nonsense. It's just right. Does that it just hurts my ears literally to have to sit there and listen to that. Wow. And you're right, Sapphire. I believe the churches are not supposed to be advocating for one candidate or the other. I will say that in recent years, I'm not sure if they rolled that back. I'll have to check on that, but they are not supposed to. They're not supposed to be engaging in political discourse. At least that's what my understanding was. There was some amendment or something they passed pertaining to that, but they might have changed that. So I'll have to check on that. But you are right. That's an interesting point. And then share, this is what happens when churches put money before character. Yeah, that's a good point too, Cher. They gave her a voice and chair for her agenda and allow her to lie. Yeah, it's terrible. I'm not convinced God would speak to her unless she repent. Yeah, it's just really sick what they're accused of. I want to briefly, for just a few minutes, I want to go over some of the paperwork on this particular motion. Let's go ahead and take a real quick peek at this. It is about 20 pages, so we're going to spend just a little bit of time on this. I want to kind of just go through the main highlights on this. This was the actual decision that was handed down by the judge today. And you can see right here, he's got state of Georgia, and you got Donald Trump, you got Rudy Giuliani. He's got them all listed right here. So let's just go through here. There is some interesting little nuggets right here that I like. And if you have any questions about it as I go through it, please don't hesitate to put it in the comments. That way I don't go too far ahead of where we need to be. As I go through this real quick. Okay, order on defendant's motion to dismiss and disqualify the Fulton County District Attorney on January 8, 2024. Defendant Roman, we're talking about Michael Roman via Ashley Merchant. Remember that? Filed a motion to dismiss the indictment and disqualify Fulton County District Attorney. The district attorney's office. 8 co-defendants later joined and supplemented the motion, including Donald Trump, if y'all remember, raising additional grounds for disqualification. Among other allegations of disqualifying conduct, the defendants contend district attorney obtained a personal stake in the prosecution of this case. Yeah, like no duh. From financially benefiting from her romantic partner aka the paramour Nathan Wade, who she personally hired to lead the state's prosecution team. And remember, not only did she hire him, she also hired him basically illegally. She was supposed to go to the Cobb County Board to get permission before she spent this type of taxpayer money on this case. I mean, that's what the law requires. However, the judge, after hearing a motion concerning this particular situation, said, hey, it's no big deal. I'm going to allow it to stand. So the judge goes on. More specifically, defendant Roman alleges the district attorney and Wade traveled together on multiple vacations. Of course they did, while Wade was covering many of the associated expenses. Remember, they come up with that cash excuse. He's going to talk about it at length here. Defendant Roman later supplemented his motion with receipts from some of these travels. The state responded with an affidavit arguing that district attorney had not received any financial benefit through their relationship with Wade and that their personal travel expenses were roughly divided equally. Of course they were. Obviously they were. And he cites where it could all be found out. As alleged, these claims present a possible financial conflict. And listen, the rule as to whether or not, or I should say what the limit is for the money that's supposed to be reported, $100 is where it should be, because that's what the law states when it comes to political campaign rules. If you receive a gift of $100 or more, you're supposed to report that. And DA Fani Willis admitted on the stand that she did not do that. So that's going to be another problem that she's going to have to deal with at some point. Well, we'll see how that goes. Obviously, they're not too keen on handling or handing her or making her handle her own affairs, but we'll see how this goes. More importantly, the defense motions that the state's response created a conflict in the evidence that could only be resolved through an evidentiary hearing, and one that could not simply be ignored without endangering a criminally accused constitutional rights to proceed through the process, procedural due process. After reviewing 2.5 days of testimony, during which the defendants were provided an opportunity to subpoena and introduce whatever relevant and material evidence they could muster, the court finds, and this is where it's going here, the court finds that the defendants fail to meet their burden of proof and that the district attorney acquired an actual conflict of interest in this case through her personal relationship and recurring travels with her lead prosecutor. The other alleged grounds for disqualification, including forensic misconduct, are also denied. However, the established record now highlights a significant appearance of impropriety that infects the current structure of the prosecution team, an appearance that must be removed through the state's selection of one of two options. The defendant's motions are therefore granted in part. So technically, it's a partial win. So we debated earlier as to which way this was going to be considered, as far as a win for Donald Trump's side or a win for the Fani Willis side of things. Technically, there is a partial judgment in this particular case, but we're just splitting hairs when it comes to this. You know, it is what it is, and unfortunately, it's not exactly what we wanted, but it's not complete bad news. And remember, we also talked about this case was going to hinge on exactly how did the judge apply the rules of evidence and what level of proof were they going to make the defendant show. In other words, if it's an appearance of conflict, which is basically what he is saying here, it should be a no-brainer and she should be off. If it's a higher standard, like a preponderance of the evidence, like 51% out of 100, boom. And I know other attorneys will say, oh, you know, the judge could apply beyond a reasonable doubt type standard. I've never seen that before. Now, obviously, in a criminal context, it is that high, like 97, 98% beyond a reasonable doubt. That's left up to a jury. But generally in these type of motions to have a prosecutor removed, it is a higher bar. You got to have something there, but at the same time, they don't even want the appearance of something improper. When you're looking to put 20 some people in a cage, in a jail cell, to literally destroy their lives, ruin their families, their ability to care and take care of themselves, it should be something that we make sure all the I's are dotted and all the T's are crossed. I mean, really, it's not hard to figure this out. Okay, actual conflict of interest. Our highest courts consistently remind us that prosecutors are held to a unique and exacting professional standard in light of their public responsibilities and their power. Every newly minted prosecutor should be instilled with the notion that she seeks justice over convictions and that she may strike hard blows but never foul ones. And they cite the case right here, Berger versus United States. In case you're ever wondering, you can always highlight a particular case, copy it, and just click it into Google, and you'll actually have the case pull up. Nowadays, with these AI tools they have certain websites that use these AI tools, and man, they can quickly help you find case law to support a position. It's really amazing. Maybe I'll do a video on that one day, because it may sound like a snoozer, but it's extremely interesting how you can use that to find answers that you may have to legal questions. Because remember, there's the law, and then there's the way that the courts interpret the law. Right? And it goes on. Most importantly, prosecutors are expected to assume a role beyond a mere advocate for one side and must make decisions in the public interest, not their own personal or political interests. And of course, this definitely does not describe DA Fani Willis, but the judge here is going to make a case as to why it does. And he goes on to cite the case, and he's got another case here. Every court may exercise such powers as necessary to protect or officiate its judgments. Every court has power to control in the furtherance of justice the conduct of its officers and all other persons connected with a judicial proceeding before it in every manner appertaining thereto. Basically, he's just citing case law that says what he just said a minute ago, how important it is to be ethical. Disqualification of a prosecutor due to a conflict of interest is thus not a creature of statute. I want to tell you right now, before I forget, this is one of the reasons I'm very confident that if an interlocutory appeal is filed, like I think it will be filed, I'm very confident that the state Court of Appeals and eventually the Supreme Court of the state of Georgia will take this case up, because there is a conflict in the law. And that's one of the things that any appeals court likes to look at when they take an appeal. There's not enough case law, as the judge is talking about right now. Yeah, it's kind of all over the place. Does this standard apply? Does that standard apply? When can it be used? When can it not be used? This is the perfect type of case to get to the bottom of it. And that's all the more reason why I am that much more confident that they will take this case up eventually. So disqualification of a prosecutor due to a conflict of interest is thus not a creature of statute as much as it is a judicial remedy recognized by our appellate courts since their formation, generally on grounds of public policy, as is the administration of law should be free from all temptation and suspicion so far as human agency is capable of accomplishing this object. And I know that sounds like a bunch of garbly goop or whatever, but let me see if I can just put it in layman's terms. When you hear public policy just means what's the norm? What is it usual, customary that we do as a people, as a society? That's similar to public policy. It's just it's almost like a public law. It just, how has it always been done? What is the norm? And that's generally what they're saying. There's not a law, as we talked about, that says this is when you can disqualify a prosecutor. It's generally something that we just understand exists because of public policy in the court system. And again, he's going through and citing these cases, Conley versus Arnold, Baker versus State. Baker stated that holding propriety demands that a solicitor general cannot personally prosecute a case in which he was personally concerned. In other words, you can't have a personal connection to the case. Nicholas versus State said the administration of the law, and especially that of criminal, should, like Caesar's wife, be above suspicion and should be free from all temptation, bias, or prejudice. Of course, they're highlighting the important parts. If you remember the Caesar's wife comment, that was, I think it was Steve Sandow that put that case law on the record. And he's exactly right. How does this not apply to dismissing DA Fani Willis? The administration of law, and especially that of criminal law, which this case is criminal law, should be like Caesar's wife, the king, the Greek king's wife, above suspicion and free from all temptation, bias, prejudice. In other words, if you're a man and you're in Caesar's court, you don't need to be looking at Caesar's wife. You don't need to have any temptation. You don't need to be doing anything with her. You need to stay away. It's not going to end well for you if you don't. And that's essentially what that means. The Georgia Supreme Court was most recently denoted conflicts of interest and forensic misconduct as the two generally recognized grounds of disqualification. Okay, so you've heard that during the trial too. There's the conflict of interest for forensic misconduct, and they denotes conflicts of interest, number one, and forensic misconduct. Them are the two categories right there for grounds for disqualification. And that's another case we heard a lot about, Reed versus State. A conflict of interest includes acquiring a personal interest or stake in the defendant's conviction, i.e. Fani Willis and Nathan Wade. Come on, Judge. How could this not be any more clear? Am I missing something here? This is as clear as you can get. A conflict of interest includes acquiring a personal interest or stake in the defendant's conviction. Someone help me out. Am I missing something? Boom, she should be going to I love, and again, this was brought up during the trial too, in the defendant's conviction, a personal interest. If Fani Willis, Nathan Wade does not have a personal interest, I don't know who does. And see Black Law's Dictionary. Black Law's Dictionary is, like in our daily life, we may turn to Webster's Dictionary. At least back in the day when we had dictionaries in the house, we would get the Webster Dictionary out and look up the word. Well, the attorneys in general, when they are trying to define a particular word, they go to Black Law's Dictionary. I'm assuming, if I remember, I looked into it one day. There was a guy with the last name Black, and he started a dictionary, or it was the company, whatever. They started it, and it just stuck. So that's what it means by Black Law's Dictionary. There's nothing racist there. It's just the name of the book. All right. And then when it comes to defining conflict of interest as a real or seemingly incompatibility between one's private interests and one's public or fiduciary responsibilities. And of course, fiduciary is like a trust, like a trustee. It's your obligation to put someone else's interest ahead and before your own interests. When I think of that, I think of children, like our kids. We have a duty to protect our children first and foremost, even beyond our own immediate concerns and needs. It's your fiduciary duty that you have. In such circumstance, no showing of prejudice by a defendant is required. And they cite the case law for all this stuff here. Okay, this is so because a prosecutor's duty to the public creates an additional public interest that must remain unconflicted in every criminal case. So he's going on and he's explaining it here, and we're going to highlight here the determination of whether a prosecutor is laboring under a conflict of interest is a fact-driven one. So in other words, the facts of the case, of each particular case, determine how the case is going to be judged as far as having a conflict or whatever. Here, this particular case said finding insufficient evidence of a conflict of interest after establishing through testimony the annutate nature of the connection between the lead prosecutor and the victim's mother, who worked as an employee at the same office. In this case, Wade's manner of payment is not actionable on its own. I don't get this. Wherever a private attorney like Wade is paid by the billable hour, a motive exists to extend or prolong the assignment. That I agree with, because he was paid at that time, though, he was paid by the hour, but under the contract, it was flat rate. That's generally how they do I'm going to back off that. He did have a contract that was flat rate, but he was paid billable hours at this time. So that's what they're talking about right there. It goes on. However, it says this, however, is a tension that the legal profession has long accepted. It's been my experience in criminal cases, most of the time when you hire a criminal defense lawyer, it's not like a civil lawyer. Generally, a defense lawyer is going to say, hey, I'm going to take your case. It's $10,000 and that will pay through trial. It doesn't cover appeals or anything along them lines. Certain expenses might be extra, but their fee is flat rate, whether it's 1 hour or 1,000 hours. On a civil context, we're probably all familiar with paying by the hour, and that's just generally what my experience has been on that, and I think that's pretty normal across everywhere. So it goes an SADA, talking about Wade, oath in office in combination with the supervision theoretically provided by a neutral and detached district attorney should generally be sufficient to dispel the appearance of that improper incentive, nor would a romantic relationship between the prosecutor standing alone typically implicate disqualification, assuming neither prosecutor had the ability to pay the other as long as the relationship resisted. But in combination, as is alleged here by the defendants, a prima facie argument exists of the financial enrichment and improper motivations, which would inevitably and unsurprisingly invites a motion such as this. So he's saying what we already know. When you have a district attorney and is having a relationship with the special DA, talking about Wade, and Wade, or I should say Willis is paying Wade, there's going to be an incentive there for there to be this type of malfeasance going on. All right, so it goes on. As to the financial allegation, the court makes the following factual findings. On November 1st, 2021, a district attorney hired Nathan Wade to serve as the prosecutor. It was $250 an hour. They extended the offer first to Governor Roy Barnes, who declined that. Remember that in court? He looked at this case and said, man, I don't want nothing to do with this case. Count me out. I want out of here on this case here. It says no evidence introduced in a case that Wade's ever received permission to exceed the monthly hour caps. His contract was renewed November 15, 2022. And it continues on. It's just talking about their travel together and how the judge looked at it. Between October 22 and May 2023, the district attorney and Wade traveled together on 4 occasions that resulted in documentable expenses. The first included an extended trip on October 22 to Miami and Aruba. Must be nice, right? And a cruise. Wade initially covered the expenses for the October 22 trip, totaling $5,223. December 22, they flew to Miami for another cruise. So he's about to explain how he looks at this. In May 2023, they traveled to Napa Valley, where Wade covered the airfare, lodging, another 28, 29. They went to Tennessee, Alabama, South Carolina, and Georgia. Remember, they have a love nest up in Woodstock at, was it Holiday Inn Express or one of those? They also admitted to dining out on multiple occasions and taking turns covering the bill. At least that's what they allege. We all know how that's better. With seemingly full access to Wade's primary credit card statements, the defendant, this is what the judge rules, the defendants did not produce evidence of any further documentable expenses or gifts, nor were there any relevant through the discovery. In total, defendants point to an aggregate, meaning a total documented benefit of $12,000 to $15,000, which kind of sounds low to me, but that's what the judge wrote in there. The district attorney and Wade testified these expenditures were not meant as gifts and not designed for the benefit of the district attorney. Both testified the district attorney regularly reimbursed Wade in cash. Yeah, right. I don't believe that. She just they're giving every criminal defendant now and in the future that's arrested for anything the way to explain their expenses or any type of record problem they have as far as money goes. They can simply say, I'm black and I keep money at home. DA Fani Willis did the same thing, and the judge said it was fine. It was proper. They also explained how to get away when cell phones catch you. She literally wrote it out that this just explains basically nothing. And they routinely in Fulton County and in places all across America routinely put people in jail for, I should say, based on evidence that they just got done destroying and that apparently the judge went ahead and swallowed, which is so unfortunate on so many different levels. And the fact that now Wade and Willis are going to continue to prosecute several of these defendants, many of these defendants under a RICO statute for perjury, which is the same thing that they're being accused of, if you can imagine that. It's really just sad and sickening on so many ways. Again, in the end, it's probably going to work out fine because it's going to delay. It says, in addition, and much more important, the court finds, based largely on the district attorney's testimony, that the evidence demonstrated that the financial gain flowing from her relationship with Wade was not a motivating factor on the part of the district attorney to induce and prosecute this case. I don't know how he could say that. He talks about her money, how much she makes a year, and that she's got tons of money. Therefore, there was no reason for her to do something as far as illegal or improper to obtain more money. But Judge, that's just not correct. She was not flowing with a bunch of money. And the way I know this, she had a tax lien for $4,600 she couldn't pay because she didn't pay it. When you have a tax lien taken against your property, that's not good news. That means you didn't pay your taxes. You didn't pay your property tax specifically and notably because you don't have the money for it. I don't believe that. That's just, again, this is just a judge trying to find a way to dispose of this matter. Defendants argue the financial arrangement created an incentive to prolong the case, but in fact, there was no indication the district attorney is interested in delaying anything. Indeed, the record is quite to the contrary. I totally disagree with this. He's basically just saying that they didn't have an incentive to prolong the case. Without sufficient evidence that the district attorney acquired a personal stake in the prosecution or that her financial arrangements have had any impact on the case, the defendant's claims on actual conflict must be denied. Again, the defense loses on that. Now, the appearance of impropriety, this was the other standard we were talking about. Finding insufficient evidence of an actual conflict of interest does not end the inquiry. Our appellate courts have endorsed the application of appearance of impropriety stated, or I should say standard, to the state prosecutors, even without an explicit finding of actual conflict. And he cites the case law pertaining to that. He goes on to explain the cases cited here that result in the disqualification did not hold that actual conflict is a necessary prerequisite. The state nevertheless argues that the facts presented suggested as much, and while that may be so in some instances, the opinions do not make that finding. And this court cannot ignore that the explicit language of the Georgia Supreme Court and multiple opinions from the Georgia Court of Appeals. Further, while Davenport, citing another case law, is the first instance this court can find of where the exact phrase appearance of impropriety is used to assess the disqualification of a state prosecutor, the reference to Caesar's wife and Nicholas versus state, and the admonition against all temptation and suspicion in this other case cited demonstrates the principle has long been endorsed in Georgia law. While formerly undefined in Georgia precedent, meaning prior cases in Georgia, the appearance of impropriety is generally considered conduct or status that would lead a reasonable person to think that the actor is behaving or will be inclined to behave inappropriately or wrongfully. Again, he cited Black Law's Dictionary, and the bottom has different cases cited and clarifications. All right. And he goes on to even talk about what the federal courts, barring from the federal judicial recusal standards, a reasonable person is not an uninformed member of the public with only a passing knowledge of the facts on hand. He cites the cases here. This must be the standard, as otherwise, in this case, a casual, uninformed, or misinformed observer might believe the district attorney may recuse herself merely because her father shares a last name with the co-defendant, nor is a reasonable person. He's basically laying the foundation of why he's going to rule the way he's going to rule. And remember, the case laws conflict. They're somewhat confusing. And the way it is right now, the judge can rule either way that he wants to rule. And that's exactly what he did on this right here. He's just citing the case law on this part. One final observation can be gleaned from a careful study of our appellate decisions, meaning the Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court, State of Georgia, applying the standard. The remedy can vary. See, that's what I've been talking about. the remedy can vary. It can be, it's one standard, one place, another standard, another place. And that is why this thing has to go up on appeal, which is obviously good news for former President Trump. Nor would the finding of an appearance of impropriety on the part of the district attorney herself, in contrast to an actual conflict, necessarily result in a disqualification of the entire Fulton County District Attorney's Office. He's dissecting these cases that we're not going to do as far as dissecting, because it's not important. I want to get to the bread and butter here as to what the judge is saying on this, because we know how he's going to rule. To drill down on it is not going to really benefit us that much. But I do want to talk about this. The defendants have exhaustively documented every public comment made by the district attorney's office, because they're going to be talking about the church language that we just went over and how inappropriate that was, because that church speech alone, friends, is enough to have the DA and the DA's office removed, but this judge doesn't see it that way. The defendants have exhaustively documented every public comment made by the district attorney concerning this case through their motions and supplemental filings. Many of these already have been addressed through a pretrial challenge made on similar grounds brought by defendants Trump and Latham. So he's laying it all out. Let's get down here near the bottom, because I want to see exactly as the judge is summarizing this. He goes through all the other grounds. Defendants evoke a range of other constitutional, statutory and county provisions in support of disqualification. Again, we're not going to drill down in each and every one of these. In a separate motion adopting the arguments of her co-defendants, defendant Latham presents an additional theory. She asserts the right to call the district attorney as a witness at trial to examine her bias towards the defendants and demonstrate that she brought a politically motivated prosecution. Remember, this is not the first time District Attorney DA Fani Willis has been in trouble for this type of thing. There was another case that she was actually dismissed off of by the court, because the court said something to the effect of, although it may not be an actual conflict, you cannot do this. Remember, she decided that she supported one candidate, and the opponent of this candidate, she was going to bring into as part of this RICO trial. She was trying to indict the individual of her friend, of the person she supported for a particular position in the Georgia state government. Isn't that amazing? She thought she could get away with that. And of course, the judge scolded her, to put it bluntly. There is a video. If you go back to my videos and look on that list, you'll see it right there. So here's the bottom line. Here's the conclusion. Whether this case ends in conviction, acquittals, or something in between, the result should be one that instills confidence in the process. A reasonable observer, unburdened by partisan blinders, should believe the law was impartially applied, that those accused of crimes had a fair opportunity to present their defenses, and that any verdict was based on our criminal justice system's best efforts at ascertaining the truth. Any distractions that detract from these goals, if remedial under the law, should be proportionally addressed. After consideration of the record established on these motions, the court finds the allegations and evidence legally insufficient to support a finding of an actual conflict. So he did not find an actual conflict of interest. However, the appearance of impropriety, so in my mind, he used the lowest standard. The appearance of impropriety remains and must be held as previously outlined before the prosecution can proceed. The defendant's motions are therefore granted in part and denied in part, and signed today by Judge McAfee. So I think that you really can't say that it's a complete loss for the defendants before, for Trump and his friends. But at the same time, it's remarkable in my mind that the judge said, I didn't use the higher standard. I used the lower standard of exactly what are we looking at here? I mean, does it look wrong? Because if it looks wrong, it's probably wrong. And he didn't, that's what he went with, the lowest bar. But even at the lowest bar, he could not find his way to dismiss this entire case, or at least dismiss DA Fani Willis's office off this case. And it's just shocking. It offends the senses. You know what I'm saying? So, wow. I'm just shocked by it here. Let me look at a few of your comments. Sapphire, thanks. Church is not supposed to talk. Yeah, I think that is the way it is. You put money before character. Sure, I agree. Yeah, I think we've been over a couple of these. I don't want to go too far down. See, Merchant testified that Fani stated that Wade would be paid $3 to $4 million by the end of this case. Yeah, it's very possible he would have made a bunch of it. Kirk, thanks for joining today, Judge Corrupt. Dude, I don't know. I'm disgusted by the ruling. But I don't know if you were with us at the beginning of this, but the bottom line is this is probably good news in a lot of ways for Donald Trump. As I said earlier, there's going to be an interlocutory appeal. We saw what Stephen Sato, the attorney for President Donald Trump, said. They're going to continue to fight to have this case ended now, which to me is clear but coded language. The interlocutory appeal is coming. And if that happens, that's great news. All these cases against former President Donald Trump, they are falling by the wayside big time. All of these cases are. When you see these delays and things that are occurring, I mean, delay, this is just great news for the president. Put it off so he doesn't have to sit in court every single day. He can get out and campaign. When he becomes president, he can take care of a lot of this nonsense himself. I think there's a good shot the Supreme Court is going to grant him presidential immunity, a lot more than most people are thinking that he's going to receive. Also, there's another Supreme Court case. The name of it is not on my mind right now, but it's one of the January 6th hostages that have appealed to the Supreme Court. I think it has to do with this so-called obstruction charge that the special prosecutor and I think it's Jack Smith that's handling most of those, essentially brought against all of these January 6th individuals. And I think if the Supreme Court rules that is not a proper application of the law, there's going to be a lot of people walking out of jail, and definitely a lot of the cases and a lot of the charges against former President Donald Trump are going to be dropped. At least I definitely hope that's the case, but that's my prediction. I think that's exactly where this is going, because they are just wrong on the law, and they are definitely wrong in implying the law. You know, it's going to be interesting. Donald Trump wins again. Isn't it going to be interesting to see if they actually prosecute that corrupt cop at the Capitol that killed that lady for crawling through a plate glass window through that door? Remember that video? The glass shattered. I'm not sure who broke it, but she started to crawl through that, and that guy shot her dead. Just shot her dead right then and there. Absolutely disgusting. And that cop, by the way, is the same cop that years before lost his gun in the men's restroom. Remember that? So this cop is really a fantastic example of how to be a good police officer. Shoot a former Marine dead crawling through the window. Absolutely outrageous and disgusting. Don't lose heart about this with Donald Trump. I'm telling you, this is good news. Looks like we have continued good news on the horizon. The fact that this case is going to be delayed with this appeal that I definitely predict is great news. You have Alvin Bragg's case on hold because, surprise, they forgot to turn over a bunch of documents. That is going to take a long time to resolve, and it should easily be able to be continually put off. Also, on that Bragg case, the way they're applying the law on that case for this hush money payment or this check to porn star Stormy Daniels, man, that is a waste of time. It's a misapplication of the law, and I think it's going to go south in a hurry. The Letitia James case, that's nothing but a civil case that will run its course, whatever the course will be. Jack Smith is a loser, a proven loser. He lost against the former, it was either West Virginia or Virginia governor and his wife when he went after them for campaign finance type of violations, and he got served big time in that case. As a matter of fact, he lost at the Supreme Court, and Supreme Court chastised him for that. They actually gave him a rebuke from the bench for what he was doing, which was completely wrong. So this guy was in such embarrassment, they sent his backside to The Hague to prosecute war criminals out there, and that's where he's been all this time. So he's back with a vengeance, and he's trying to take down Donald Trump before he becomes president because he wants to make a name for himself. This guy's a cold loser. Donald Trump would say this guy's a choker. He chokes. It's just that simple. And as far as this document case, man, this is such a bunch of nonsense. You've heard me refer to this before. All the other presidents have done this. There's a lot of things that are confusing and unclear as to what laws are to be applied and how. You have current President Joe Biden has done something so much worse than anything Donald Trump has been accused of. They were saying, oh, well, Donald Trump refused to give stuff back, where Biden was, he was like, hey, mea culpa, here's all the stuff back. I give it to you back right now. The problem with that is, fine, charge Donald Trump with failure to give it back quick enough. But you have to have fair administration of the law. You can't have George W. Bush, I think even Bill Clinton, definitely Hillary Clinton, wiping a server, interfering with records, destroying evidence, wiping servers, having an unsecured server at her house. President Joe Biden having records everywhere, all over his garage, inside his cars, and giving that information that he claimed was confidential to an individual writing a book for him. So he's given classified secrets because he's writing a book and wanting to make money. And what's even worse about it, at the time he took all those records, he was never even president of the United States. At best, he was vice president of the United States, would have been another violation right then and there. And the point I want to make is Donald Trump, he had, at the time he was president, absolutely right to have whatever record he wanted to have. He could literally hold the records in his hand, blink his eyes twice, and they're declassified. I'm being a little funny about that, but that is the reality. He can just simply say to himself, these records are declassified, and they're declassified. He had the sole absolute right. It's unchecked. No one can review him. He can declassify as president anything he wants, anytime he wants. I don't know whether they're not making a more loud deal about that. To me, that is golden. The fact he was talking with a reporter or someone writing a book and saying right here is a classified document, that doesn't mean it was true. He could just be blustering, bragging. He could just be full of whatever. But the bottom line is he was able to walk out with a box and say these are declassified. And trying to put him in jail for that, where they're not going to go after Joe Biden, in my mind, for doing something as far worse, is absolutely ridiculous. As far as this case here in Fani Willis, don't worry about this, my friends. This ain't going to go nowhere. And that judge that's handling part of that document case, not the one in D.C., but the one in South Fulton or South Florida, that is a judge appointed by President Donald Trump. And I think she's much more favorable. Of course, for Donald Trump, she's much more reasonable. It shouldn't be that way. It shouldn't be you go to jail or don't go to jail, depending on who your judge is and what your political persuasion is. Obviously, you know that, and I know that. So I hope you benefited from today and going through this. Don't lose heart, my friends. I'm telling you, it's all going to be good. Everything's going to work out. God is in control. So don't worry, don't stress, don't fret. Have a good, safe weekend. Enjoy yourself. Get out there and enjoy this. Well, we're having beautiful weather here. Wherever you're at, enjoy your life. You're breathing, you're walking, you're talking. You can see, hear, talk. It's a good day to be alive. And I always appreciate you joining me. I always say, keep that mind free and never give up. And until next time, my friends, I am J.R. Dukes.